Margaret Hayes had always believed in small kindnesses. At 58 years old, she'd learned that life's most meaningful moments often arrived quietly, disguised as ordinary encounters on ordinary days. It was a Tuesday morning in late September when her world shifted, though she wouldn't realize it for several weeks. The subway platform was crowded as usual. Margaret stood near the yellow safety line, her worn leather bag hanging from her shoulder, watching commuters rush past like water flowing around stones in a stream. She'd been making this same journey for 3 years now, ever since her husband Robert passed away and she'd been forced to return to work. The job market hadn't been kind to a woman in her late 50s. Despite 20 years of administrative experience before she'd left to raise their daughter Emily, most companies wanted younger candidates. Someone with fresh energy, they said politely. Someone cheaper, Margaret knew they meant. She'd finally found work as a receptionist at a small consulting firm downtown. The pay was modest, barely enough to cover her mortgage and bills, but it gave her purpose, structure, a reason to put on lipstick each morning and venture out into the world. The train arrived with its familiar rumble and squeal of brakes. Doors slid open, releasing a flood of passengers onto the platform. That's when Margaret noticed him. A young man in his early 30s, attractive in that effortlessly casual way, struggled with a baby stroller while juggling a backpack and trying to navigate through the crowd. His dark blue shirt was wrinkled, his hair slightly disheveled. He had the exhausted look Margaret remembered from Emily's early years, that bone-deep tiredness that came with caring for a small child. As he maneuvered the stroller toward the train, a small white stuffed bunny tumbled out onto the concrete platform. The young man didn't notice. He was focused on getting the stroller through the doors before they closed. Margaret moved without thinking. She bent down, her knee protesting slightly, and picked up the soft toy. She could see it had been well loved. One ear was slightly faded from countless washings, and there was a small stain on its paw. "Excuse me," Margaret called out, moving as quickly as she could through the crowd. "Sir, you dropped this." The young man turned, his face registering surprise and then relief as he saw the bunny in her hands. "Oh my goodness, thank you so much," he said, his voice warm with genuine gratitude. He reached out to take the toy, and Margaret noticed his wedding ring and the dark circles under his eyes. "My daughter would have been devastated." "She can't sleep without Mr. Hoppy." Margaret smiled, thinking of Emily's own beloved stuffed elephant from years ago. "I remember those days," she said gently. "They grow so attached, don't they?" "They really do." He tucked the bunny securely back into the stroller, next to where a small girl with dark curls was sleeping peacefully, completely oblivious to the near crisis. "You're a lifesaver, really." The train doors began their warning chime. "You'd better go," Margaret said, stepping back. "Thank you again," he called as he pushed the stroller into the car. Margaret waved as the doors closed and the train pulled away. She turned back to wait for the next one, the small interaction already fading into the background of her day. She had no way of knowing that the tired young father was David Richardson, and that his life was about to intersect with hers in an unexpected way. 3 weeks later, Margaret arrived at work to find the office buzzing with unusual energy. "Have you heard?" her coworker Linda whispered as Margaret hung up her coat. Linda was 62, a grandmother of 5, and the closest thing Margaret had to a friend at work. "Mr. Peterson is retiring. They're bringing in someone new to run the whole company." Margaret's heart sank a little. New management often meant changes. Sometimes it meant letting go of older employees to restructure and bring in younger staff. "Do we know anything about who's taking over?" Margaret asked, trying to keep the worry from her voice. Linda shook her head. "Just that he's young, bought out the company, made his fortune in tech, apparently. Starting today!" The morning passed in a flurry of nervous energy. People tidied their desks, spoke in hushed tones, speculated about what changes might be coming. At 11 o'clock, the office manager announced that the new owner wanted to meet everyone individually. Margaret would be called in at 2. She spent her lunch break in the small park across the street, eating a sandwich she barely tasted, watching pigeons peck at crumbs. At 58, how many chances would she get if she lost this job? The thought of starting over again, sending out resumes that would be passed over, sitting through interviews where she could see the hesitation in their eyes. It made her feel tired in a way that had nothing to do with her body. But Margaret had learned resilience through loss. She straightened her shoulders, finished her sandwich, and walked back to face whatever came next. At 2 o'clock sharp, Margaret knocked on the door of what used to be Mr. Peterson's office. "Come in," called a voice that sounded somehow familiar. Margaret opened the door and stepped inside. The young man behind the desk looked up from his laptop, and they both froze. It was the father from the subway, the one with the baby stroller and the stuffed bunny named Mr. Hoppy. Recognition dawned on his face immediately. "You," he said, standing up with a smile. "You're the woman who saved Mr. Hoppy." Margaret felt her cheeks flush. Yes, I didn't realize." "I'm Margaret Hayes. I'm the receptionist." "David Richardson," he said, coming around the desk to shake her hand warmly. "Please sit down. I've been looking forward to meeting everyone, but this is a wonderful surprise." Margaret sat, her mind racing. This was her new boss? The tired young father from the subway was now the owner of the entire company. "How is your daughter?" she asked, because it seemed like the right thing to say. Even though her heart was pounding with uncertainty about her job, David's face lit up with that particular glow that parents get when talking about their children. "She's wonderful. 3 years old and full of energy. My wife Rebecca and I were still figuring out this parenting thing." He laughed. "That morning you saw me. That was my first week doing the morning commute with Emma. Rebecca had an early surgery, she's a doctor, and I was completely overwhelmed." "It gets easier," Margaret said softly. "And then they grow up, and you miss those exhausting days more than you'd expect." Something shifted in David's expression. "You have children?" "A daughter, Emily. She's 30 now, living in Seattle." Margaret smiled. "The distance is hard, but she's building a good life out there." They talked for a few more minutes, and Margaret was surprised by how easy it was. David asked about her role at the company, how long she'd been there, what she thought could be improved. He listened, really listened, in a way that felt genuine. Finally, he leaned back in his chair. "Margaret, I want to be honest with you about something. I've been reviewing all the personnel files, looking at how this company operates, and I have some concerns." Here it comes, Margaret thought. The restructuring, the gentle dismissal. "I think this company has been underutilizing its most valuable assets," David continued. "You've been working here as a receptionist for 3 years, but your file shows 20 years of senior administrative experience, project coordination, client relations." "Why are you answering phones?" Margaret blinked, caught off guard. The job market for someone my age." This was what was available. David frowned. "That's absurd. Experience is valuable. Wisdom is valuable. The ability to stay calm under pressure, to read people, to know how to navigate complex situations, those things come with time." He pulled out a folder and opened it. "I'm creating a new position, Director of Client Relations. It would involve coordinating between our consultants and our major clients, managing complex accounts, maybe mentoring some of our younger staff. The salary would be considerably more than what you're making now." Margaret's throat tightened. "Are you offering me this position?" "I am," David said simply. "If you're interested." "But you barely know me," Margaret said. One small kindness on a subway platform. "It's not about the bunny," David interrupted gently. "Though I haven't forgotten that, and neither has Emma. She still talks about the nice lady who saved Mr. Hoppy." He smiled. "But when I review your file, I see someone with exactly the kind of experience and temperament this role needs. And when I talked to your coworkers this morning, discreetly, everyone mentioned how you've become the person they go to when they need help. Advice, or just someone who'll listen." Margaret felt tears prick her eyes. She'd spent the last 3 years feeling invisible, passed over, relegated to the margins of working life because of her age. And now this, the subway platform, she said softly. "I just did what anyone would do." "That's where you're wrong," David said. Most people wouldn't have noticed. Most people were too busy rushing to their own destinations. But you saw someone who needed help and you helped. That tells me about who you are." He stood up and extended his hand. "So what do you say, Margaret? Will you take the job?" Margaret stood, her legs feeling unsteady, and shook his hand. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I will." 6 months later, Margaret sat in her new office, a real office with a window, reviewing client reports and feeling more energized than she had in years. The promotion had changed more than just her paycheck. It had restored something she'd thought was lost, the sense that she still had valuable contributions to make, that her experience mattered, that she wasn't invisible. David had proven to be an exceptional boss. He valued the older employees, created mentorship programs that paired experienced workers with younger ones, and implemented policies that honored work-life balance. He left every day at 5 to have dinner with Emma and Rebecca. He encouraged others to do the same. One afternoon, he stopped by Margaret's office with a photo in a frame. "I wanted to show you something," he said, smiling. Emma drew this. It was a child's crayon drawing. 3 stick figures on what appeared to be a subway platform. One figure was very small, one medium-sized, and one had long brown hair and was holding something white. "That's Mr. Hoppy," David explained, pointing to the white blob. "And that's you, the angel lady who saved him." Emma's words, not mine. Margaret felt her eyes mist over. "It's beautiful." "She wanted you to have it," David said. "As a thank you. Rebecca and I wanted to thank you too. That morning, I was going through one of the hardest periods of my life, starting a new business, trying to be present for my family, feeling overwhelmed by everything. Your simple kindness reminded me that people can be good to each other, even when they don't have to be. It stayed with me." After he left, Margaret hung the picture on her wall, next to a photo of Emily. That evening, as she rode the subway home, this time in the opposite direction, at a more leisurely pace, Margaret thought about how life unfolds in mysterious ways, how a moment of simple kindness can ripple outward in directions we never see coming. She thought about how she'd felt 3 years ago, lost and diminished after Robert's death, struggling to find her place in a world that seemed to have no room for her, and she thought about how wrong she'd been to believe that her best years were behind her. Sometimes, Margaret reflected as the train carried her home, the universe rewards us not for grand gestures, but for small acts of human decency, for noticing when someone needs help, for bending down to pick up a fallen toy, for choosing kindness when we could just as easily choose indifference. She smiled to herself, watching the city lights blur past the window, grateful for second chances, for unexpected connections, for the reminder that it's never too late for life to surprise you, all because of a stuffed bunny named Mr. Hoppy and a moment of grace on a crowded subway platform.